Good evening, folks. This is Carl, your ticker guy, with your No Banker Left Behind bailout update for the 25th. Now let's talk about what happened today, folks. We had all day long the market rallying big on the promise that this bailout bill was going to get done. This is what everybody was told. But I watched the credit markets because the credit market is where the stress is. Yes, spreads came in a little bit. Yes, people relaxed a little bit. But for a deal that was announced as being done in principle at 10 o'clock in the morning, the market didn't unlock, and it should have. After the market closed, Senator Shelby came out and said, no deal. And he held up a stack of papers, maybe including some of mine, but most prominently and identified, including the letter from the folks at the University of Chicago with 165 economists, all saying it's not going to work. Folks, I've been saying it's not going to work too, okay? But listen, now there's 165 people with PhDs after their names that agree with me. So here is the problem that I see with the current bill. If we pass it and it doesn't work, we've spent $700 billion we don't have trying to bail out a bunch of banks. We still have a locked up credit market, but worse, much worse, we spent the $700 billion. We need the $700 billion. Weiss Research, a very highly respected firm, was out this morning with a report that says that there are 1,600 banks and thrifts in trouble, far more than the FDIC is admitting to, and this is by their internal research and their analytics. These guys are very well respected folks. You ignore them at your significant peril. This is well north of $3 trillion worth of assets. Now let's make a relatively conservative assumption and say that out of those banks, 1/3 to 1/4 of them fail. This could be potentially approximately $1 trillion worth of assets. The FDIC in recent months has been losing 20 to 40% of the asset base as its estimated loss for each bank that goes under. What this means is that we could very easily see that entire $700 billion being necessary to be sucked into the FDIC so your insured deposits get paid back. Bloomberg ran a very alarming story this morning about the possibility of the FDIC needing huge sums of money or else. Well, that's not a maybe, okay? The FDIC released a very strongly worded letter not long after that story was put up on their website, in which they essentially parroted the old line, nobody has ever lost a penny of an insured deposit during the time that we've been around. Well, it's true. However, the fact remains that the FDIC, although it does have access to short-term liquidity from the Treasury and from other sources, they ain't got $700 billion. They don't got $1 trillion either. And they're going to have to go to Congress for it. They'll get it. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. If the FDIC ever failed to pay off, if Congress didn't make good on that commitment, the shotguns would come out. All right, none of us want to see something like that. But you know, I mean, you literally take away people's checking accounts, and what do they got to live for, right? Not a good scenario. So we're going to need to spend that kind of money to bail out the FDIC in this mess. This is where the problem comes from, folks. The amount of credit that the United States has is not infinite. The amount of debt that they can sell is not infinite. It is very large, but it is not infinite. John Bonner came up with an alternative plan today. He thinks that we ought to take the structure of these MBSs and have the government essentially issue insurance policies against default, thereby liquefying the market, allowing it to trade, and essentially attaching this on there for a fee. That's actually not an awful idea. I need to sit down and think about it, and I need to look at the details of what he's actually proposing, none of which I have available to me as I record this. But that's an interesting alternative, and one that I think deserves some consideration. I happen to prefer something much similar to what John Hussman is calling for, which is essentially forced recapitalization through what amounts to an involuntary receivership for those firms that are insolvent. But before we can do that, we have to put the CDS monster, the credit default swap monster, back in the cage and lock it. Because if we don't, the explosions will start. The fear here, folks, from my perspective, is that we blow the $700 billion, we get nothing for it. The credit default swap monster is still running around, and he starts smashing to China. That $700 billion is going to become irrelevant and insufficient within days if that happens. And there isn't any way to predict whether or not it will. What I can tell you is the credit markets don't believe that this bill that was proposed by Hank Paulson will get the job done. This isn't my opinion alone, folks. 165 economists, several research firms that are very highly paid, very good people, and the credit market itself, all saying this isn't going to do the job. Let me make clear, folks, we are in for a very difficult time in America. This credit overhang is going to have to be worked off, and the people who are overextended are going to have to go under. It is not going to be pleasant. We got a horrible unemployment print, durable goods print this morning. Awful. There isn't any other way to describe it. Close to 500,000 people lost their jobs in the last survey period. That is a ridiculously bad number. It will get worse. Bailout or no bailout. Please do not understand what I am arguing for, folks, is that we will just muddle through. We will not. We are going to suffer a severe and difficult recession. You can listen to the people in Washington, D.C. who claim that we can avoid this, like President Bush, if you wish. You can urge people in Congress to pass this $700 billion bill if you wish. But if we spend the $700 billion and we get the severe recession anyway, we won't have it to do things like help you. We will not have the money to help you stay in your home. We will not have the money to help with job retraining. We will not have the money to spend on infrastructure, bridges, roads, solar power plants, nuclear power plants, all kinds of infrastructure projects that really put people to work and make a positive contribution to GDP. All of that $700 billion is instead going to go into the pockets of a few fat cats in Wall Street so that they can get bailed out of some bad bets that they made. Everyone talks about the credit markets being supremely important, and they are. But if we spend the $700 billion and the credit market doesn't unlock, the $700 billion is still gone. We would be far better off to find a way to unlock the credit markets to determine who is and who is not trustworthy without spending the $700 billion. And there are ways to do it. Mr. Bonner's plan is one possibility. John Hussman's is another. Mine is the third. There are many other competing plans, and we should have a debate about all of them. I believe it is necessary for the Congress to have people like myself, Mr. Bonner, and his experts, John Hussman, anybody else that has something to contribute, up to Washington for a hearing. Let's put all of these plans on the table under oath. Let us all put our right hands on the Bible and swear to whether or not we have any conflicts of interest, whether we stand to make any money from whatever it is that we're proposing as a solution. Let's put this all in front of Congress, and let's make a decision as a nation about what is best for all of us. Not just for a small group of people, not just for a central banker and the former chairman and CEO of Goldman Sachs. We owe this to our nation, folks, and we owe it to our sons and daughters. It is time to choose. Today, we still need to get on the phones. We need to call again. We need to fax again. No $700 billion, no banker left behind bill. Let's do it right, not do it fast. Have a good evening.